This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Shalom Aleichem, good morning, welcome to our viewers on Torah Anytime. And since we mentioned Torah Anytime, Mitzvah Hashem, this coming Sunday, Shvat Yutet, is their annual campaign, and I strongly encourage everyone to take part in this wonderful endeavor. There's so much koyach of Tuma that is being spread through the internet and different means of social media today. And Torah Anytime comes and combats that and spreads as much Torah as possible to counter the koyach of Tuma. And they're doing such a great job. I think it's so apparent that it's considered Gavra de Mare Messiah Lei. You see a person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I like what you do. And the success that they've been having since they started about 19 years ago is unparalleled. And I think anyone who partners with them is a Zvulun that partners with a Yisascha on the highest level. Just think about it. If you had a chance to buy a Tesla stock, just when it started, Amazon, just when it started, who wouldn't do it? This is much better because this is eternal schusi. And if you take $1 and you want to donate it to an institute that has 50 people sitting and learning, a big school that has 900 guys sitting and learning, so $1 times 900 people, that's 900 schuyas. It's great. But what if you have an institution that spreads Torah to tens of thousands every single day, all day long? Which is just unbelievable what your dollar can do for you. And this is an everlasting schus. So it's probably the greatest investment one can make. And they're making it easier to donate, not only through the computer. If one stays away from smartphones and computers, you can actually call 718-540-5722 and donate. And our unique ID team number is 1002818. 1002818. They're suggesting $1 a day. I think at least $1 a day. One can definitely do more than that, especially people who benefit from Torah Anytime. We have to show Hakara Satov for this great endeavor and wish them much success. And Mitzvah Hashem, they will continue to shower us with more and more wealth of knowledge, wisdom of Torah, and inspiration as they have been doing. B'chazdei Hashem, one more announcement before we continue. B'chazdei Hashem, I'm zoichet to say Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. Last night, a new sefer came out. This is 34 and this is 35. B'chazdei Hashem. This is Megillas Esther, Volume 2. About 7 or 8 years ago, Chelek Aleph came out, and in it there was Megillas Esther, with commentary of Mida Keneged Mida, measure for measure, on the whole story of Purim and Megillas Esther. The second part of the sefer, inside this sefer, and Chelek Aleph as well, had 350 different interpretations on one little liner in the Gemara. Adelo Yada. You have to drink so much so you can't distinguish between Aru Haman, curses Haman, and blesses Mordechai. Megillah Daf Zayin Amud Beis, Paskin LaHalacha, in Orachaim Tafresh Tzadhei Seif Beis. So this little one-liner in the Gemara, 350 interpretations, Bahalacha Uva'agada. This was 8 years ago. And now, Baruch Hashem, another 200 different interpretations on Adelo Yada, what it really means, Bahalacha Uva'agada, and new Mida Keneged Mida on the Megillah. So the Megillah appears here in Chelik Beis as well. So Lemaisa we have in one little line in the Gemara, one little line, 550 interpretations, different ideas, observations, insights. Bahalacha uva agada, the nafkaminas lahalacha, that this chiyuv that we have from Rava, Amarava mechayevinish levesim bepuraya adelo yada, how does it affect us? Do we really have to lose our brains? So 550 interpretations, Chelek Beis, just came out, Baruch Hashem, and it's available in the back, both in Hebrew and in English. So today, Mitzvah Hashem, we're talking about Inyane de Yoima and Parashas Yitro. The first thing I want to start with is something that we all heard about last week. Last week I got an interesting shayla just a few hours before Shabbos. I'm sure you heard about the tragedy in the army base where the crane collapsed. No. Unfortunately, 2 soldiers died. I think 6 were injured. This was last week, maybe Wednesday. So somebody sends me a question, very chashuv harav from Bnei Brak, just a few hours before Shabbos last week. Can we say, Hashem yikom damoy, Hashem should avenge their blood, and these poor soldiers that died as a result of this, can they be called kadosh? The only reason they are in that army base is because of the terrorists, Yimach Shema. So it's as if the Arabs killed him. As if the terrorists killed him, Mimele, they get the title, Hashem yikom damoy, kadosh. The Gemara says about people who died, Al Kiddush Hashem, Harugei Malchus, En Birya Yechola Lamud B'Mchitzason, Barabasa Daf Yud, Psochim Daf Nun. No one comes close. We spoke about it many times last year. The Zohar HaKodesh says in Bereshis Daf Lamed Ches that there are 7 chambers upstairs. And in the 4th chamber, those who died just because they're Jewish. They died in the hands of Goyim just because they're Jewish. They sit there. Nobody comes close. It's the same chamber with Rabbi Akiva. And obviously the different levels within that chamber. Rabbi Akiva is a very, very high level within that chamber. But anyone who died because he is Jewish in the hands of Goyim, he gets to go there. So these people didn't die in the hands of Goyim. The crane collapsed. But the only reason they are there is because of the war with the terrorists, Yimach Shema. So can we use the title Hashem Yikom Damam and Kadosh? Shimon Rabbi Yisai, Dayanim Mumchim, what do you say?
I wouldn't think so.
You don't like it?
Because they died in tragic circumstances, but their tragic circumstances, you hear, Lolenu, people walking past a building site, and something falls from a building site and kills the person.
But they're not in the building site because of the terrorists. They're fighting, we're in a war. And the only reason they are in that army base is because of the war. It's because of the terrorists that brought him there. So what's the difference if they shoot him or if something happened, but the only reason they're there, if it wasn't for the war with terrorists, they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be there, it wouldn't happen.
It was like, it was not connected directly with the action of God. It was like what we call in English law, acts of God.
Everything is an act of God, what we call in the Jewish law.
Yeah, but it means it was something that was not brought about by human aid.
So you're saying no connection whatsoever, don't give the name Kadosh, and don't use Hashem Yikom Damu on the Matzeva.
I think so.
Anyone wants to be a little more giving?
Is that a strong question, meaning that anyone that actually is living in Eretz Israel today under this situation should be considered Kadosh?
You want to stretch it all over. So you're agreeing with him? You're agreeing with him? Oh, you're saying, Lemaisa, everybody who dies, even from a heart attack, in the middle of Yerushalayim, is Kadosh.
Exactly. Otherwise, they would be on the land. So, like, just being here under sirens and missiles, fire, like these terrorist attacks that happen all the time.
That's a big Chiddush.
I'm asking.
Maybe too big of a Chiddush.
We heard someone that passed away on the way to an airlift shelter who had a heart attack.
Right?
Is that coming to category?
Somebody ran away, he heard the siren, he ran to the shelter, and he had a heart attack. He couldn't take it. Lichora, he's connected.
Does it matter what the crane was doing? Was crane working with self-defense, building a battery for self-defense?
The crane was just stationed there. It was heavy rain last week, and that caused it to be unstable, and it collapsed.
I mean, we could say if the crane was there in order to build something...
Yeah, for the war effort, of course. Sure. It is for the war effort. That's the only reason it was brought there.
I mean, not just that he was there because of that, but also the whole circumstance.
True. So you're saying it is direct, it's connected, and therefore you want to give him Kadosh, and Hashem Yikom Damoy. Ad sheva shlishi ve'achia b'neihem.
Like Dam Nikuf.
Chulin Daf Zayin Amud Beis, we learn Dam Nikuf Me'atzeh Kedam Korban Oila. A person who's on his way to do a mitzvah, and he hurt himself, and he starts to bleed. That's called Dam Nikuf. And a person should not say, look what happened. He should be elated. Gewaldik, I was zoiche to bring a Korban Oila. That's what you should say to yourself. Wow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu really likes what I'm doing. And this Dam Nikuf, the blood that comes as a result when you're on the way to do a mitzvah, is counted upstairs as the Dam blood that you brought as a Korban Oila. The entire Korban goes up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the greatest thing to do. Very encouraging. If your kid gets a little, not talking about adults, we should know this, but your kid gets a little boo-boo on his way to do a mitzvah. Oh wow, you just brought a Korban. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash right now, but you just brought a Korban. Not that you chas v'chayla should try to do this, to make this happen. But in case it happened, gewaldik. But that doesn't make you a Kadosh. Doesn't say Hashem yikum damoy. Baruch Hashem, should be happy you have a schus. You brought a korban oila. But doesn't give you a title, Kadosh.
We have the opposite svara that if someone died from a shmidlik death, something fallen on him, it sounds like his Gemara and Sanhedrin, it sounds like Kadosh Baruch Hu was
You're telling us the Gemara says, Af al pi she'arba misos beis din batlu. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says, even though the 4 capital punishments executed by beis din have been cancelled, we don't have beis din, we don't have Sanhedrin today. But they're still around. Somebody who has to die in Skila will find a crane collapsing on his head, or he falls from the 10th story building. I don't know. Somebody else is in Chenek, he drowns in water. The Gemara brings different examples. So you're saying it's the opposite here. Shh. What's that?
That's a different question on the way a person goes. Maybe it's true.
It's the Gemara's cheshbon. Arba misos beis din lo batlu, the Gemara says.
Isn't it Zakadosh? In other words, he's giving his life for others.
That's a big chiddush. A person who's supposed to be executed by beis din, the misa atones for his sin, but he doesn't get a title Kodesh.
No, because he didn't do something to save a Jew while he was doing his mitzvah.
Oh, these soldiers were sleeping in their tent. They weren't doing anything special to save a Jew at that time. But they were there only because they wanted to save lives. It's part of the war effort. That's what happens. Let's see. There's a Gemara in Shavuos Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. I think we mentioned it a few times last year when discussing shadows like this. The Gemara says, a king that goes to war, and up to 1/6 of his soldiers die, there's not going to be any claim on him. It's only natural. People die in wars. Toshis over there says, we're talking about Milchemes Rishus. How much more so Milchemes Mitzvah? This is a Milchemes Mitzvah, no question about it. So if there's more than 1/6 of the soldiers die, the king is going to have to give some accounting. In other words, the king wants to broaden his borders, just to make this place a little wider, a little bigger. Everybody's coming. Everybody's making aliyah. There's no space. We need a little more space. We go to their neighbors and we try to conquer their land. Up to 18% of the soldiers die. That's okay. That's natural. That's the way of wars. You see, it's only normal. It's only natural. And we discussed this when we talked about friendly fire. Soldiers that die in friendly fire. And we asked, do they get the title? Kodosh. Can we write on their matzeva, Hashem Yikom Damo? And we said yes. That's just part of the war effort. That's how wars are done. There's a mice in Netanya, I think maybe close to 20 years ago or so. Not the Park Hotel massacre. This was in a mall. A terror attack. And this Yemenite young man, Yechia something, I forget his full name, jumped to help those who were wounded. And the terrorists were still there. And they were still shooting. And he was shot. And he was killed. But then it turned out that it's probably our forces that killed him. The army was already there. The police were already there. It wasn't clear. It seemed as if our people killed him. It wasn't clear. And Maran Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal asked, can we put on the notification, the Levaya is going to be in this and this for the Bachur Yechia, Hashem Yikom Damoy. Do we put it when it's not clear? And Reb Chaim said yes. Right, Hashem Yikom Damo. Hashem should avenge his blood. Then they asked him, should he write on the Matzeva, Hashem Yikom Damoy, in Kadosh? And Reb Chaim says on the Matzeva, don't write it. But you can write the word Kadosh on his Matzeva. The Bartenua in Maseches Beitza, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Yud, brings from a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos Daf Samech. There's a thing called Sandal HaMesumar. The time of the Romans, the Jews were hiding in a cave from the Roman soldiers. It happened to be on Shabbos, and they were all wearing, for whatever reason, I guess that was the fashion at the time, spiked shoes. Clits, like the sneakers. Roman soldiers came, and they heard him. There was such a commotion and such fear, and they started running out and trampling each other, and that was the first Miron tragedy. Many people died. But who killed him? Not the Roman soldiers. The Jewish people running out and stepping on each other and killed their own. Chazal decreed after that you're not allowed to wear this type of shoe on Shabbos because of what happened. The Bartenura calls these people who died Harugei Malchus. Even though they were killed by Jews, not by the Roman soldiers, but why were they killed? Because they were running away from the fear of the Roman soldiers. So it's like dying in a war. You see, even if you're killed by a Jew, it can be that you get the title Kadosh. Hashem Yikom Damo Lichora. But I think in this case this is very different. Very, very different. The Chofetz Chaim even writes in Machne Yisrael that a Jewish soldier who goes to war should daven every day. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, 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 make sure that I don't kill another Yid. Please make sure I don't kill somebody from my army. Because he writes, in the commotion, in the mehuma, in the bahala of war, sometimes one's sword goes into his brother's heart. That's what he writes. So you should have a special tefillah that he writes for a Jewish soldier. So it's only natural that sometimes friendly fire. This is an example of friendly fire, but this is very different in our case. The soldiers were sleeping in their tent. It looks like negligence. In fact, I understood this week that this is under investigation because a few hours after this crane collapsed, a few hours before this crane collapsed, it was heavy, heavy rain. And one of the soldiers complained, I feel like I'm drowning. It's not stable here. And the person responsible for putting this crane, or the people responsible for putting this crane and making sure it's stable, did not go and check. It's negligence. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of this. They're checking it, don't know what's going to be with it. Not up for me to decide, but it sounds like it's just negligence. And the claim that the only reason they're there is because of the terrorists, that's true. But then again, every Jewish soldier in every army base in Israel, in the middle of Yerushalayim, in the middle of Tel Aviv, why is he there? Trying to protect us from the armies around us, from terrorist activities. So every Jew in the middle of Yerushalayim, there's a soldier in a base, and chas v'sholom, there's a collapse of some kind of a cane or whatever it is, and he dies. Will we call him Kadosh? Will we call him Hashem Yikom Damo? What's the connection to the war effort? It's so distant. And if you're saying Hashem Yikom Damo, you're as if asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu should avenge the blood of those who killed him, those who weren't responsible and didn't do what they're supposed to do to make sure that this crane is fixed in its place and it's not going to move. Think about it. It's only because they're in the army base they died. And what if the soldier goes out of his house in Tel Aviv, goes into the car to drive to the base, but there's a car accident? Will we say he's a Kadosh? Harugei Malchus, Hashem Yikom Damo? It's the responsibility of the person who wasn't careful. Either him, the driver, or the person who banged into him. Whether it happened 5 minutes away from his house in Tel Aviv or 5 minutes away from the base. This is not connected to the war effort. This is not what the Gemara in Shavuos is talking about. This is not the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Samech Amud Beis, with the Sandal and Mesumar is talking about. That's where they're running away from the soldiers, from the enemy, or that they're fighting and accidentally shooting themselves. But this is so distant. They're sleeping in their bed. What's the connection to the war effort? No connection whatsoever. So lechoira, I think you cannot use Hashem Yikom Damo. In fact, you don't want to use Hashem Yikom Damo because as if suggesting HaKadosh Baruch Hu should avenge the blood of those who killed him. And that's the Jewish people who weren't responsible enough. And again, not judging them. Shoygeg, Oynis, I don't know what it was, but it has nothing to do with the war effort. This collapse can happen anywhere. And especially if it's negligence. And lechoira, you cannot use Hashem Yikom Damo and you can't use Kadosh, even though he gets reward for going into the army, trying to fight, but that's nothing to do with being Kadosh or Hashem Yikom Damo. Ken nire le'anius daiti.
But I think if it was negligence, according to the Torah, would the people responsible for the crane have to go into an air miklat, or it becomes completely part of the...
We have to see if it's shoygeg, if it's shoygeg korov le'oines, if it's oinef, if it's oines gamu. We have to have a Beis Din, Sanhedrin in fact, in order to decide if he has to go to a Ir Miklat or not. But I was just asked about Hashem Yikom Damo or Kadosh, so we're not going into an Ir Miklat.
If this story happened in Gaza, makes a difference? Or?
That's where it happened. Either in Gaza, no, I think it happened in Lebanon. But that doesn't make a difference. They're sleeping in their tent. What's the connection to the war effort? No difference if he's sleeping in his bed in the army base in the middle of the country. He's also there to protect us from the Arabs, from the terrorists. What's the difference? No connection to the war effort, and therefore that's The title of Hashem Yikam Damo doesn't go. And in fact, you don't want to use this title because it's as if you suggest Kodesh Baruch Hu should take revenge against the Jewish people responsible. Let's go. Parshas Yisro. Vayishma Yisro. Rashi says he has 7 names. Yeser is called because he was miyater, one parsha in the Torah. He is called Yisroi. Where does he get the name Yisroi? Because he converted. You convert, you get the letter Vav. What's the connection to the letter Vav? Why not Yitrav, Yitrag, Yitrad, Yitracht, Yitrach? So many other options, 21 other options. Why Yitro with a Vav? Says the Imrei Avom, Cain, after he killed his brother, the Medrash says, Zohar Kodesh says, Kodesh Baruch Hu put an ois. What's the ois? The different opinions in the Medrash. But the Zohar says he actually put the letter Vav on his forehead. Why the letter Vav? Because Cain transgressed the 6th commandment. Has to do with our Pasha, 10 commandments. What's the 6th commandment? No shirtzach! Don't murder! And he did! Oh, so from now on you're going to have a constant reminder. You're going to have the letter Vav, you're indicating what you did. Maybe that's going to help you to do tshuva. The Medrash brings in Eicha Rabbah, in the Sifri, in Yalkut Shimon, in many places, before Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted to give the Torah, he went to the other nations. Would you like to receive my Torah? What's in it? He went to Bnei Ishmael. What's in your Torah? Don't steal. No signal. What? But that's what we do. Yadu Bakol, Pere Adam, Ganov Gunavti. You know, they're very, very makpid. The Ishmaelim. Not to go 4 amos without netilas yadayim. Very makpid. Not to go 4 amos without netilas yadayim, to take something and to take it into their hands. Not netilas with the washing. Netilas yadayim. Making sure something is in their hands, but not necessarily their own. Very makpid. No, this is not for us. So Kodesh Baruch Hu is fine. Bnei Esav. Would you like my Torah? Maksiv Bey. What does it say there? Lo yisyotzach. Don't murder. What? That's our Messiah. That's our Yerusha. Al charbecha tichye. That's what we do for a living. Okay, I guess it's not for you. So when Yisro says, I want to convert, I want to join, and he says, the previous one says, I don't like the 6th commandment. I don't like Vav, the 6th commandment. Like, it's not for me. He says, yes, it is for me. I like it. Oh, you like the letter Vav? So you get the letter Vav when you convert, and instead of yes, sir, now you're called Yisoy.
He was part of the Kibud, of the
At that point, I don't know who he belongs to, but anyone who wants to convert and says, I like the 6th commandment, I should get the letter Vav, or other letters as well.
Could have been Gilgal of Cain.
What's that?
Yisrael was Gilgal of Cain, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the Gilgal of Hevel.
Yes, that's what it says in the Zohar. Vayichad Yisrael al kol ha'toiva. What does it mean, Vayichad? Vayichad? Happy. Unkelus. Rashi. Davar acher. His flesh became prickly. Why? Goose flesh. Because he was upset with the destruction of the Egyptians. So Rashi says, this is the source for the popular saying, do not disgrace a Gentile in the presence of a convert. Even up to a 10th generation after the conversion. Rashi's source is Sanhedrin, Daf, Tzadi Dalet. So, Moshe Avskeni Balatoya, Bale Atoisves ask. Rashi says, up to 10 generations, but why? There's so many converts, they don't care. They're very happy. Great tzaddikim came out of them. They're happy that the 10th generation back, somebody was still connected to the wrong religion against the Kodesh Baruch Hu. What's the connection? He is now 8th generation into the business. Great tzaddikim. His grandfather, his great-grandfather is all tzaddikim. He's going to care that 10 generations ago, or 9 generations ago, somebody was still connected to... What's the connection? And therefore, they offer a tremendous Kiddush and understanding of what Rashi says. Rashi brings it from the Medrash. It's like a Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Tzadi Dalet. What it means that his 10 generations, ad 10 doiros, they don't mean 10 generations literally, generation after generation, as we normally explain generations. He explains 9 shuos of kmatim, until he has 10 lines of wrinkles in his face. In other words, even when he was very, very, very old, that specific convert don't disgrace his forefathers in his presence. We always thought he's talking about 10 generations back. No, we're talking about the same person himself. He, even though he converted very, very young, until his later years, old age, he'll feel bad when you're making fun of his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and that we can understand. So 10 generations, that doesn't mean 10 generations. It means 10 lines of wrinkles in his face. Yisro comes to convert. And normally, we learn Yevamos Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, when a guy comes to convert, we push him away a little. Like a small doicha v'yemin mekareves. Why would you like this? Now you have an easy life. Do whatever you want. Go drive on Shabbos while eating shellfish. Do whatever you want. You don't have to fast on Yom Kippur. Why would you need this? Yes, it's great reward, but why would you need this? Says the Iyun Yaakov over there, Yevamos Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, this is true. But only when the guy comes to a Jew and says, I'd like to convert, you should initially reject him. But when the guy comes to a ger and says, what do you think? I shouldn't convert or not? The ger should accept him with both hands and pull him close. Not small doicha, v'yemin mekareves. Yemin mekareves, small mekareves. Both of them should pull him in. Why? Because the Gemara over there says, kashim gerim leIsrael, kasapachas, as only soil. The Tosfos offers a few reasons why that is. Sometimes they make us look bad. A convert comes. He is so medactic in mitzvahs. He makes Jewish people look bad. Why aren't you medactic by mitzvahs like me? Makes us look bad. But the convert who's medactic just like him, he's not going to make him look bad. He knows exactly where he came from. He should tell him, yes, absolutely come and join. That's a tremendous chiddush. So small doicha v'min mekareves is only for a goy that comes to a Jew. A goy comes to a convert, he should say, yeah, sure. Join me. It's a great religion.
If we have this principle that converts...
If we have one?
If we have this rule, this idea that converts obey and makpidimi and mitzvahs, I was looking at the says Riddles, the special where it says about Shabbos, it says that your convert, it includes the convert, all the people that have to rest on Shabbos. And I found that very strange because we know the convert has to keep all the laws like every other Jew. So I'm not sure why it's being singled out there.
That's a great question. The Oznaim Torah answers your question. It says keep the Shabbos. Everybody included, even the convert. Of course, why not? It says the Oznaim Torah because a goy can keep all the mitzvahs. The Rambam in Ilchos Melachim, Perek Yud, Halacha Yud says we don't deny a goy from doing any mitzvah. But what if he wants to keep Shabbos? He's not allowed to. Goy sheshavas, Sanad Nun Zayin. Goy sheshavas, chayav misa. When can he start keeping the Shabbos? Only when it becomes vegercha. Now you're able to. So maybe that's why he says there's no Torah. He had to be singled out because before that he's not allowed to, as opposed to all other mitzvahs that he can. Obviously, other than Talmud Torah as well. Yisro comes, and we had a big festive meal for him. So that gives us a chance to ask a question about a seudas mitzvah. Normally in a seudas mitzvah you have bread, you have fish, you have meat. When is it that you have a seudas mitzvah, but you only have bread and legumes? No meat, no fish. Can it be? A seudas mitzvah. No nedarim, everybody is healthy, the doctor says you're allowed to eat whatever you want, and we'll say, no. Seudas mitzvah, only bread and legumes. Kitnios.
In the 9 days.
9 days. Seudas mitzvah overrides the 9 days and we have meat. In fact, some people have seudas mitzvah every single night. They do a siyum every single night in order to have meat. We said that the Hasidim do that for a reason. What's the reason first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed? Nedorim Pei Aleph, B'Metzia Pei Hei, Shelo Beruchu B'Torah Tchila. The language of the Ran is Lo Haisa HaTorah Chashuva Be'eneihem Kol Kach. Torah wasn't so important. They learned, but no bracha. They learned just like any other interesting subject. Second Beis HaMikdash, why was it destroyed? Yom Adaf Tes Amud Beis, Sinaschina, Machloikes, Lashon Hara. What do you do in the Siyum? Rectification of both. You show Kodesh Baruch Hu, I love your Torah, and you call everybody and you eat together. Achdus. So that's the ultimate tikkun to the Chum Beis HaMikdash. So Hasidim Dafka want to have a Seudas Siyum every single night on the 9 days. I'm not saying, we talked about it halachically, I'm not saying it's a good idea or not a good idea. I'm giving an idea that some do. So Seudas Siyum has the koyach to override the 9 days. I'm asking, when is it that we do a Seudas Mitzvah and yet only bread and legumes? Can it be? Sudas Safar is Sudas Mitzvah? First of all, it's not limited to legumes. There's an inyan to eat legumes. But it's not limited to it. And is it a Sudas Mitzvah? I don't think so. It's not counted as Sudas Mitzvah. Otherwise, we would look for Sheraim from a Sudas Mitzvah. And the opposite, you don't take food out of the mourner's house. Berek Chidish, the Gemara, in Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Amud Beis says, when you do a Seudah, to publicize Ibur HaChodesh, the Sanhedrin just added a new month, it's a Seudas Mitzvah, and you only eat bread and legumes, so people won't say, oh, they only came to the Seudah for the meat and for the fish. Seudas Mitzvah, only with bread and legumes. You did so good in the previous riddle. Not really, but we'll give you a chance to rectify that.
What's wrong if they say...
What's that?
What's wrong if they say that they only came for the meat?
We want to publicize, we added a new month, and you're coming for the meat. What's wrong with you? I don't know why we're not afraid of that in any other Seudas Mitzvah, but that's what the Gemara says, Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Amud Beis. Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, comes. Right? Give us a chance to ask a question about father-in-laws. Who in the Torah had a father-in-law who was younger than him? Normally, you are older than your father-in-law. Normally your father-in-law is older than you. Who in the Torah had a father-in-law who was younger than him in 2 years? You are older than your own father-in-law in 2 years. Can it be? 2 years older than your father-in-law? In the Torah. In theory, it can be, but it's very rare. You know anybody who's older than his father-in-law? It can be, in theory. But in the Torah, there was somebody like that. Boker Tov. Sanhedrin Samechtes Amud Beis, we learn. Haran. Who's Haran? The brother of Avraham Avinu. He was 8 years old when he had Sarah. We know that Avraham Avinu is older 10 years than his wife Sarah. So that means when Haran was 8, Avraham Avinu was already 10 years old. That means Avraham Avinu is older in 2 years than his brother Haran, who also happens to be his father-in-law. So we found out a father-in-law who is younger in 2 years than his son-in-law, and that is Avraham Avinu. Can you do the math? You know who's older in how many years? I asked for 2 years in the Torah. If your friend won't like that, let me know. The pasuk in the parsha says, "Ve'odat alem esa derech yelchu ba." The Gemara Baba Kama Daf Kuf Amud Aleph darshans this pasuk, breaks it up to pieces, and ba, they should walk in that way. Ba zu kvura. That's talking about burial, and therefore it gives us a chance to ask a question about burial. Listen to a maaseh. Reuven goes on Friday, like today. He goes to the cemetery. He goes to his father. And he saw another Yid who comes there with a big bouquet of flowers, gorgeous flowers. And he puts it next to a certain matzeva. He stands there for a few minutes and he leaves. That morning, before Reuven left his house, he had a big fight with his wife. A big fight. And he said, you know what? My wife loves flowers. I think this would work. I think this would appease her. This bouquet of flowers must cost hundreds of shkalim. Very expensive. It's gorgeous. He took it. He brought it to his wife. He says, my dear wife, we should have a wonderful Shabbos. This is for you. Wow! Normally on Friday he buys one flower. When it's a Yom Tov, he buys 2 flowers. A big bouquet worth hundreds of shkalim. It worked. Baruch Hashem, it worked. She was immediately appeased. Shalom, Veshalva, Ava, Ve'achdus returned to their house. Gevaldik. Reuven was very happy with this clever invention. And he said over on Shabbos, he said it to one of the Talmid Chachamim in the shul, what he did, how it worked. He was very happy. The Talmid Chacham said to him, you have some serious issues that you transgressed. First of all, Isuana. You're taking something from the grave. Isuana. Second of all, Grevas das. Your wife thinks you are so nice and generous and you thought about her. You went all the way to the store and you spent hundreds of shekels. You spent nothing. You didn't go to the store. You took somebody else's flowers. Gnevas das. And the third thing is Gezel. You stole. What do you have there? Aboy side, Dayani Mumchim. Did he transgress these things? Is it allowed? Is it not? How do we look at this? What do you say? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvoroi.
As long as the flowers did not have on them the sign saying in men with 7 flowers.
Yeah.
Wife, perhaps. If he gave them
If it had the sign, he would remove it. He's smart enough to remove it. If he's clever enough to do this thing, he's clever enough to take the little sticker.
First of all, the try to understand that this is benefiting from grey, but that is when you actually take something like the body or part of the body or maybe the stone.
Nobody's digging and taking the body.
But it or stone, the way it's taken, the flowers.
Can you sit on the matzeva? Isu ana. Can you sit on the matzeva? I'm benefiting. It's very comfortable here. Take a little pad, a little pillow. You sit. Enjoy yourself. Tanning on the matzeva. Are you allowed to? You don't like it. It's not proper. It's isu ana. If it's isu ana, you have a serious issue here. You're saying this is not proper. Okay, so I'm not proper.
The issue is when we actually physically take something away.
Hana from sitting is not counted as a hana. Sits there for 5 hours. Geschmack. He doesn't like people bother him, so he goes to a very quiet place. Very quiet neighbors.
Sure,
That's his and hana in life.
the flowers, I think, would be hefker.
Are they hefker?
Why are they hefka? He put it there for a purpose.
He put it there for a reason. Why is there hefker?
Flowers in the cemetery are a Jewish thing.
Oh, let's talk about that. Is this kosher? What the other guy did? Is this kosher?
We don't put flowers on the graves.
We don't. Are we allowed to?
I heard once it was the Jewish minhag to do so, but since the Goyim started doing it, we
You have a source to say it was a Jewish minhag?
many years ago.
Do you have a source to say it was a Jewish minhag?
I don't remember whether it
Put a straw. People put a straw on the table.
Why do we put a stone and go and put a flower? Maybe we spoke about it a few months ago. I think we brought 6 different reasons why we do that. One of the main reasons is flowers decay. A week later, there's no more memory. The stone lasts forever, and we say, we remember you, and we're going to remember you forever. Just like the stone lasts forever, you're in our hearts forever. A flower, we remember you only for a week, 3 days, whatever the flower is going to survive. But are you allowed to? But I want to put flowers. I think it's nicer in my eyes. Am I allowed to put flowers? Kiryas Chana David, Shout Shuvas Likutim Simen Gimel, he brings, there's a source to it. That's the source you were looking for. In Beis Adaf Vav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Yom Tov Sheni Legabei Mes, Kechol Shavua Rabbanon. Yom Tov Sheni, you're allowed to bury people on Yom Tov Sheni, and Rabbanon made it regarding Kvura as if it's a weekday. Yom Chol. So much so, the Gemara says, Afilu lemeigaz le'asa. Even to cut down hadassim. And why would you want to cut down hadassim? Rashi explains, the minhag was, they used to put it on the bed of the deceased. L'chvoidoi. You see, putting flowers is a Jewish minhag. So no problem, right? Big problem. Most poskim who dealt with it said, big isu. Chukos samim. You're walking in their ways, it's a very not Jewish thing. But you see the Gemara discusses this. So some say it was a Jewish minhag. And then for whatever reason they stopped. The Goyim adopted it, they started it. And now when we're doing it as if we're imitating them, it's chukos samim. But even more than that. Why did we used to do this? It's on the dead of the bed of the dead person, not on his grave. And that is so we wouldn't smell the very unpleasant smell of the mess. That's lichvoidoi. But once he is buried, there's no kavod in that. That's not what the Gemara is talking about. So the entire minhag could be a minhag, a goyish minhag, and therefore one adopts it, it's chukos ha'amim. That's what the shoot Yaskil Avdi, Rav Adaya, in Chelek Daled in Yoredea Simen Chaf Hei says. He says, we never heard of this thing. This is something that people brought from Europe. It's terrible. It's minhagei agoyim. The modern ones do it. And one who will do this will transgress chukos ha'akum. Minchas Yitzchak says the same thing. In Chelek Aleph Simen Lamed Aleph, it's chukos ha'amim. Shal Shuvas Har Tzvi, Zipesel Frank, In your idea, Siman Reisha, that deals with a similar issue. Are you allowed to plant flowers on the graves like the Goyim do? And he writes, this is a minag akum, and one should not do this. Shalosh Juvas Minchas Yitzchak, Minchas Elazar, the Munkach, and Chelek Dalet Siman Samech Aleph Paskins the same. Shalosh Juvas Beis She'arim and Siman Taf Kaf Ches writes, this is a Maise Hevel Veta'atuim, Maise Boirus, foolish, vain, and resembling the Goyim. He's Damus La'akum, and one who does this, we should protest. So stay away. We don't like it. Fine, but that's the issue of the person who did it. What about the person who took?
I've seen sometimes this, I've seen a picture on the grave of the person. Is that what they're doing?
Yes. Stay away.
It seems like they're allowed to.
People do strange things. Stay away. We don't put any images, any pictures.
So the same thing would apply, presumably, like in England, the Goyim have a custom when they transport the dead person to the cemetery in a hearse pulled by 4 black horses with black plumes on them.
Is black what on them?
Sorry? Black plumes, black like feathers in the manes of the horses.
Okay.
So if a Jewish person would transport the to the base kibbutz like that, it would be...
I don't know. The rule is regarding Chukos Akum that if you don't know the source, you have to assume it's coming from Avodah Zarah. So you can't copy it. If it's something that you know is from Avodah Zarah, or you don't know where it's coming from Bichlal, you can't do it because we're afraid it probably stems from Avodah Zarah. But if you know where it's coming from, 50 years ago they decided, this is going to be nice. It's going to make it look more prestige, honorable. It's nothing to do with Avodah Zarah, then you're allowed to. That's not called Chukos Akum. Only when there's a source of Avodah Zarah, or you have no idea where the source came from, so we say it probably came from Avodah Zarah. But when we know where it came from, it's not considered Chukos Akum.
Isn't the stabber that the flowers were in order to get a good smell and also to mechabed the...
Sure.
So why should we assume that that's Avodah Zarah with flowers that they're going to for Avodah Zarah?
This minhag stems from going many years ago. And the poskim say, this is when you're imitating them, chukos akum. It probably came from some kind of a source. Today would make sense to us. Gonna be mechabed, good smell, but it probably came from a goyish minhag.
I have 2 questions.
From a avodah zarah type of minhag.
What about English date?
What about it?
On the kibbud, when they put an English date.
Very bad. The Maharam Shik says deoraisa. Very bad. Stay away.
What's the reason? Put both.
To put an English date on the matzeva. No Indian whatsoever. Put both of them is the same thing like you only have in English. You have to put the Hebrew date. If you put the English date, you're saying you give credit to account which stems from account to what? To whom? Why would we want to associate the poor person who was there, buried, with that, giving credit to that date? We stay away from that. We spoke about the Goyish date a few weeks ago in the shir. So, the Maharam Shik says, we don't pass like them. But we definitely would advise everyone who listens to us not to put the Goyish date on the matzeva. If it's already there, hard to protest. In many places in Chutz La'aretz they do it. And if one can't spend the money, he should, to remove it. It's honoring the person who's there.
What about the neshama? The neshama cares what's going to be in the grave or the kibbud?
First of all, that's you have to ask the neshama. I'm not spokesperson for the person of neshama or not there. I know what the poskim say about it. We don't like it. We don't like it. Isu d'oraisa, we don't pass on the Maharam Shik. But what do you gain from something that has nothing to do with us? When you use the Hebrew date, as we said in Parashas Boy, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, says the Ramban. Some Sofer. You commemorate a Kodesh Baruch Hu creating the world in 6 days, resting on the Shabbos, the Geula from Mitzrayim, the Geula afterwards. We're using the Hebrew month. No Indian whatsoever to use the Goyish date. Why would you want to give him any credit? So let's deal with the questions. First of all, we dealt with if it's right or not, but that has to do with the person who put the flowers on. We're talking about Reuven who took the flowers, and the first question we said.
He's saving them.
He's saving them from the Issur that he did. Where the flowers, did they become Asur Behana? Shal Shuvas Poiras Yosef, Maria Lefandri, in Choshe Mishpatzim Chav Zayin says, the Remas brings 2 opinions if you can benefit from the mitzvah. So he says, the most it is, it's an Issur Derabanan, And this is about sitting on the Mitzvah, or taking from the Mitzvah itself. Because the Mitzvah is there to protect the person who's under from wild animals and the likes. But this is flowers that are sitting on the Mitzvah. No relevance. So lichayra, it's not tzorech hames, and they're mutar behana. So Reuven didn't take anything which is asur behana. The person who brought it in, he has an issue. Why did you do this? Well, we don't. It's not our minhag. But lemaisa, it's not asur behana because it's there, and Reuven didn't transgress that. What about gnevas das? Definitely transgressed gnevas das. Right? He says to his wife, "Look what I got you. Wow, you never spent on me more than 5 shekels. Hundreds of shekalim. I guess you really feel bad about what happened this morning," and she was appeased. Is there gnevas das? Yes, there is gnevas das. But for shalom bayis, you're allowed to. If he didn't have another way to appease her, of course he's allowed to. Shut Salmas Chaim in Simin Tav Pehei writes, a remarkable thing, to say a complete lie, not to change from the truth, to say a complete lie, Mipnei HaShalom, to have Shalom Bayis, is mutar, but it's not a mitzvah. But to do gnevas das, without lying, for the Shalom, not only is it allowed, it's also a mitzvah. So not only did he not do an aveira, he actually did a mitzvah. Baruch Hashem, now he has Shalom Bayis with his wife, everything is fine. Great. Third shaila, gezel. Maybe he was allowed to take it from the grave. The dead person has no inyan. He has no inyan that the flowers should be there, something that copies the minhag agoyim. L'choira, it makes him upset. There's no benefit in it. The flowers, we said, did not become asu. And he doesn't steal from this relative who came in and left it over there because he already left and the hana that he had from it is over. But it could be that there is avak gezel, dust of gezel. Why? You're not allowed to use money of somebody else's. This person placed it there, so everybody who passes by should see, look, this person had some relatives who honor him, who come and they take care of him and they think about him. It gives them some pleasure. Maybe it even gives the mess some pleasure that people go over and say, oh, so they go and they read the Matzeva and they are inspired from what's written there. Maybe. So Isu Hana, there isn't. Gnevas das, you're allowed to because of the Shalom. But it could be that there's some kind of a gezel in it, avak gezel. But anyways, the person who did it, that's not our minhag, and we stay away. The Pasuk says, Hagbele sahar vekidashtoy. Put boundaries around the mountain and sanctify it. How exactly is putting boundaries around the mountain, putting fences around the mountain, sanctify it? How does that work? Says the Panim Yafos Alator. Who's the Panim Yafos? The Rebbe of the Sam Sefer. Hagbel es hahar. Put the gvul around the har. Who's the har? Sukkah Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph, we learn har is Yetzer Hara. One of the names of Yetzer Hara. Put boundaries around it. What's the boundaries of the letters har, hey, and reish? From the right side, the gvul of hey is daled, and from the left side, it's a vav. From the right side of the letter reish is a kuf, and on the left side of the letter reish is a shin. What's the letters that form the boundaries around the har? Kadosh! In other words, if you set boundaries and fences around the Yetzer Hara, the har, you will become Kadosh. Hagbele sahar, put boundaries around the mountain, the Yetzer Hara, vekidashto, and you will find Kedusha. In the Pasha, this har, a mountain, is mentioned many, many times. Why are there so many great mountains? Sometimes the mountains are so big, gigantic, can't even live there. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create great mountains? What's the use? Why not create a nice flat land? It'd be much easier.
Make a bracha.
What's that?
There's a bracha you can make on the hand.
Good. So make a beautiful flat land in a way that you will have to say a bracha when you see it. Big Chiddush. Psochim Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, the Ben Ishchai, Ben Yoyada. He brings a pasuk from Amos, Perek Dalet pasuk Yud Gimel. Yoitzer Harim Uvoire Ruach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates mountains. He forms mountains and he creates the wind. Ubagid le'adam ma seicho. And he declares to man what his speech is. What's the connection between the 3 parts of this pasuk? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yoitzer Harim. He creates big mountains. Boyer Ruach. Oh, he also creates the wind. And he tells the man what the speech is. What's the connection? The Beit Yada says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created gigantic mountains to stop the very strong winds that sometimes blow. Very, very strong winds. And if they weren't, these big mountains, these winds would destroy the cities. Yoitzer Harim, why? Because he is Boyer Ruach, because of such great winds, he has to create mountains. So don't create these winds, and you won't have to have these big mountains. Says the Ben Ish Chai, no, look at the latter part of the pasuk. Umagid le'adam ma sicho. The Onkelus calls us a ruach memalela. That's how we are different than animals. Our speech, ruach memalela. Evil speech, sheker, lashon hara, rechilus, leitzanus, creates winds. Major winds. And in order not to destroy this world, the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, look what they're doing with this evil speech. Look at the great winds they're creating. I gotta create great mountains to protect the cities. Now we look at the pasuk again. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yoitzer Harim. He creates great mountains. Oh, you're asking why? Because he's Boyer Ruach. Because he creates great winds. So don't create the winds. No. This wind comes to tell you, Magid le'adam, it comes to tell us, Masichu, look what your speech can do. In other words, don't take it lightly. What did I say? So he said a few words. Big deal. The guy's not even here. Who cares? He didn't hear it. No. Your speech can create such great, devastating winds that can destroy cities. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to create great mountains to weaken that wind. Ben Yoyada. Yevaldik.
The higher the mountain, the more Lashon Hara the space.
I'm sorry?
The higher the mountain, like
to protect from the great Lashon Haras.
In Nepal, in Himalaya, speak a lot of Lashon Hara, probably. The big mountains.
Not necessarily. It could be that since they're not commanded that Lashon Hara, there's going to be one Jewish guy who comes to visit there once, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw it fit to protect the whole place because one person may say Lashon Hara. It's not the Goyish Lashon Hara because they're not commanded it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to us in our language, not to them in the language that they can understand. 10 commandments. In what language were the 10 commandments said?
70.
You're both right. How can it be? I don't know. I wasn't there. But Hadar Zekeini Manatoya, it's Baalei Tosis. Perikav, Pasuk Aleph, offers two answers. Either Shivim Lashoin, 70 language, or Egyptian. What's Anoichi?
It's an Egyptian word.
What's Anoichi? Egyptian word. Medrash Tanchuma Yisro Siman Tet Zayin says, Anoichi Hashem Lokecha. Omar Reb Nechemia, Mahu Anoichi? Lashon Mitzri Hu. It's Egyptian. Lema Hadav Adoim, says the Medrash, a king had his son kidnapped for a long time. A long time. Longer than 500 years, 500 days in Gaza. And came time, Baruch Hashem, he's able to release his son. So he comes to speak with his son. He now speaks in the language that his kid now speaks because he spent so many years with the people who captured him. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm coming to redeem my people. They were there for 210 years. I'm going to speak to them in Egyptian. That's what the Medrash says. Lichoi, we have to ask. One of the great merits of Klal Yisrael, that for that they were redeemed, is that they didn't change their language. Lo shinu es shemam, they didn't change their name. They didn't start calling their kids Muhammad and Mustafa. Lo shinu et levusham, they didn't change their clothing. They all were gato and shtaimel, I don't know what they were. Lo shinu es leshoinam, they didn't change their language. So what are you telling me? Since the king wanted his kids to understand him, he had to speak to them in the new language, in Egyptian. They know Hebrew very well, not Hebrew. Lashon Kodesh. I asked this to Maran, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zatzal, and Reb Chaim writes to me, because they had to go out, they were forced to change. In other words, they kept it as long as they could. But at one point, because they're going out and they're going to meet with other people, they're going to have to discuss with the Egyptians, I'd like to borrow your silver, your gold, your clothing. They had to change their language. That's what he explained. It could be, maybe, I thought we could explain, yes, they actually can hear Lashon Kodesh, but they're more comfortable now in Egyptian after 210 years. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I know you know Lashon Kodesh, but I want you to be more comfortable. I want you to understand every single word that I'm saying. Also, it could be that when Chazal say, Lo shinu es lashon, they didn't change their language, it's talking about Pirov. But there were some people who didn't know Lashon Kodesh, very few. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants everybody to understand. So everybody knows Egyptian after 210 years. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu Dafka speaks in Egyptian according to this Medrash, in order for everybody to be able to understand and accept his 10 rayos. What's that?
This is a raya, you can put flowers on a grave, on a kever.
How?
If Kadosh Baruch Hu changed the language.
Yeah, so when you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu put flowers on the grave, we can copy it. The 8th mitzvah, the positive mitzvah on the account of the Rambam is, walk in his ways. When you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu putting flowers, you'll be the first one to do that. When the person says Chukos Akum and it comes from a Goyish place, we don't. It's the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded you on Chukos Akum. I'm sorry?
We established that the English, the Egyptian language is more understandable to the English.
It's a Midas Chasidus that they changed into, that they didn't change their language. In fact, I know a person every Friday morning at 8:15 a.m. in Me'am Loez that gives a shir in English. There's no problem to speak in English. There's a Maila to speak in Hebrew. Masechet Shabbos in Yerushalmi says, Kol HaKavua Be'eretz Yisrael, U'medaber Beloshon HaKodesh, Muvtach Lo Shu Ben Ha'olam Haba. But it's a Midas Chasidus. If you're more comfortable in a different language, you're allowed to speak it.
What about people that have, for instance, I know there was someone, a Rosh Yeshiva, that wanted to be buried with the leg of the table they used to eat Suda Shal Yeshiva. So one of the Bachrim took the leg and put it into the kettle when they were burying him. Is that something that should be...
Rabbeinu Bechayai, I believe in 3 weeks, Parshas Tetzaveh, either Parshas Tetzaveh or Parshas Tuma, says, Uminag Hasidim Shebetzorvas. It's the minhag of pious people in France, Rabbeinu Bechayai, Rishon, that they used to ask that they make the coffin from the table they had lunch on. Why? Because that's the table they said Divrei Torah. That's the table that they did chesed and brought the guests in. So they wanted to be surrounded by chesed when they go upstairs. So, same idea, that's the source.
Why do we say the only 2 holy languages that you can write? There's others and tefillin in Lashon HaKodesh and Greek. We should also add Egyptian to that, since the Kodesh Baruch Hu spoke.
Greek is not Lashon Kodesh. Greek has beauty to it, the Gemara says, not Lashon Kodesh. There's some Kedusha in Aramaic, the Gemara says, not in Greek. Greek is a beautiful language, but there's no Kedusha there. In fact, the Gemara says, Tanis Davtes Amud Beis, that when they had to translate the Gemara to, the Torah to Greek, the world shook. It was a day like a day of Churban. There's no Kedusha there. Kedusha in Aramaic. The Maor V'Shemesh says, when it says, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, the passage says, Vayedaber Elokim es kol advarim ha'ele leimor. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. Meaning, Vayedaber Hashem Elokim es kol advarim ha'ele. Everything that you're going to hear is only for one purpose. Leimor, to say to you. You should know, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. It's kedai to say all these things, just for this thought to penetrate our minds. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, Kodesh Baruch Hu is our God. There was a guy that decided he's converting out, starting to worship Avodah Zarah. One of the 10 Commandments is not to, but he decided to. His friends asked him, "What's wrong with you? What are you doing?" And he said, I go daven every day, 3 times a day. I'm pretty fed up with going to a shul and davening to a God that I can't see, but He can see me. I'd much rather daven to a God that I can see Him, but He can't see me. That's how much it makes sense to daven to Avodah Zarah. But we have another riddle about Avodah Zarah, I think. I thought we had another riddle.
Who said the answer about the Jews being redeemed? Shaloshinos was shown that it was just a miyut did change. Is that the Rosh?
I saw it in Poseches Yadecha, I believe I wrote it.
Could we say fakar that the miyut, they were redeemed in the schus of the miyut?
When you say Shaloshinu es leshoinam, l'schus loisha dvarim, for the merit of 3 things, that means l'chola klal Yisrael. So it could be a few people who did not adhere to this and did change their clothing, their names, their language. But when you say Shaloshinu klal Yisrael, that means the majority at least 51%.
They were redeemed in the schus of the chashav
L'chola, that's a very big stretch that you're saying. If you want to give us a source, we'll definitely accept it. It's a big stretch to say for the merit of a few, so the Medrash should say this. There is such tzaddikim that the merit of the few overrides the opposite, lack of merits of the others. It's a big chiddush. When it says shelo shinu, that means klal yisrael did not change. Shelo hayu putzim ba'arayos. Shelo hayu putzim beloshon hara. The Medrash also says over there. In fact, when it says shelo shinu levusham, everybody quotes Lishonim levusham and shemam. That only appears in one place. The Torah Shlema brings it. The common midrashim, Medrash Rabbah, Yalkut Shimoni, Sifri, I believe as well. Everybody doesn't. They don't say the three that we normally say. It's Ulayu Putzim Ba'arayos. There was no Lashon Hara. So not saying, so three people didn't speak Lashon Hara. Klal Yisrael, we're not involved in Lashon Hara. Not involved in Arayos. Even though they didn't have the Torah, even though they were very in a low level, and they're worshipping Avodah Zarah. As we know, the angels argued with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. But certain things they kept. Kabed esavicha ve'esimecha. Who is greater? A person who is mechabed his parents when they're alive or after their demise? Pashut. When they're alive. Comes Masechet. If it was so simple, would I ask this? Masechet Smachos. What's Smachos? It's not really simple. It's Masechet Evel, but we don't call it Evel. We call it Masechet Smachos. And in Perek Gimel Halacha Yud Beis, it says, one who honors his parents after their demise is greater than the person who honors them when they're alive. Why? Why does the person honor his parents when they're still around? Either he's afraid of them, or he's waiting for the Yerusha. But when he's mechabed them after they're gone, he does it only l'shem shamayim, and therefore gadol ha-mechabdan b'moisam, greater is the person who is honoring his parents after they die, more so than the person who honors them when they are around. I think that's a great chiddush. Last thing we'll finish with.
Can't you say that when they're alive, they're getting hana, they see how you, not for Yerusha, but they see that you're respecting them, you do more good things for them. When are they dead, do they know what's going on?
Yeah, but what's the motive of the person to honor them when they're around? For their hana, or because he still wants the Yerusha to make sure he gets the bigger part? He is afraid of them, or for whatever reason. But after they're not here, first of all, they still get hana, because every time he does a mitzvah, they're elevated in the upper worlds. And not when we're trying to say a person should not mechabed his parents when they're around. He should. But lemaise, it proves that he does l'shem shamayim, because he has no benefit from it now. He got the Yerusha, or he didn't get because there was no Yerusha. He's not afraid of them anymore because he's not here. And you still mechabed them. That shows it's l'shem shamayim. Kibud avaim. Very important to know what the Chazon Ish says. The Chazon Ish says that when Bachrim come home from the yeshiva for Ben Azmanim, before that they must learn Hilchos Kibud Av Va'em Shulchan Aruch Yoredea Reish Mem. Why? He says it's no different than Chazal's commandment. Shoyalim behilchos achad shloishim yom kodem achad. You have to learn halachos of Pesach, many halachos. You have to get ready for Pesach 30 days before. If you know you're going home to stay with your parents, you have to learn hilchos kibud avim. Otherwise, chas v'sholom, you're going to choose this. You're not going to know how to honor them properly. So just like you have to learn the halachos related to the yontif before the yontif, so too you have to learn halachos of kibud av and em before you meet kibud av ve'em. אחינו כל בית ישראל, הנשואים בצער ובשים והאום דימן בים ובין ביבשה. המקום ירחם עליהם ויוצאים מצער ולפחם מאפל עליהם משיבוד לגאולה אשתה, בעגל ובזמן קורי ונוי מרמן, אם יצא השם the next 2 weeks. I'll be in the States speaking in different communities, so I won't have a shir here, but we will have the shir again. אם יצא השם פרשס תצווה.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.